Hey everyone, welcome to the Christ Pearls channel. This is Jessica, and today I wanted to remark on this article called Remember the Words of a Prophet, Seer, and Revelator, where President Lund, Stephen J. Lund, and his wife spoke to missionaries at the Provo Missionary Training Center. It's like up by BYU and the Provo Temple. And back in 2018, when he was called, it was around the time that President Nelson gave that Hope of Israel talk, where he talked about the rising generation, and that whole year he had talked about the youth battalion, and there's so many quotes about the rising generation now. This just, for whatever reason, this phrase has become a thing. And I think where you can see that best is actually Jared from Christian Homestead. He has that spreadsheet, and he has like a whole section that's just the rising generation quotes that he could find. And they used to say this a little bit here and there in the past, but just recently there's like this huge uptick in how often this phrase comes up. And so that's maybe something to think about in connection with these remarks. But in this article, they summarize many of the remarks that the Young Men's General President gave, Elder Lund. And he talked a little bit about this concept of hope of Israel. And he says, these are words of a prophet, seer, and revelator. He tells you who you are and why you are here. His talk was given directly, specifically to you. As missionaries, I hope you'll respond in every way possible to that divine identity as children of God. And he says, for those who might think President Nelson was exaggerating or speaking flattering words about the rising generation, he cites some Princeton University professor's remarks where I guess this person had said that the Latter-day Saint youth are, quote, spiritual athletes, unquote, of their generation because of their sacrifice, discipline, and energy, along with a high level of devotion and commitment to their faith. They speak in church meetings, plan activities, and demonstrate the highest degree of religious vitality, salience, and understanding of church teachings, President Lund said. He says, what you have is faith that matters, and it's the kind of faith that moves mountains. And I like this because it makes me think of a Boyd K. Packer talk, which I'll try to find the quote. I don't even think it was a talk. It was like from a book. And I have it, and I will try to insert it here at the end. I'll go see if I can find it. But that idea of moving mountains with our faith, I think that's something that I've thought often about. I think that the main takeaway from it, or the concept that is there, is that, you know, we can have faith in things that are expected to happen, that the sun will come up, that prophecies will come to pass, things like that, those things that are planned. But it takes a different kind of faith and a priesthood power to actually move mountains. And that there is that kind of faith, that it is real, and that it's something that we could access if we needed to. But it sounds like to me, from everything I've ever read about this concept, my current feeling on it is that this is the type of thing that, like, you really do have to have your will perfectly aligned with the Lord in such a way that He'll trust anything you do, because He knows that you're not going to do anything contrary to His will. And that's a pretty tall order, I think, for all of us, most of us. And there's maybe a few people who've walked the earth from time to time. I mean, we have examples in the scriptures of these types of people who their will is so perfectly aligned with God's that they can move mountains. And it seems like President Nelson holds this generation in very high regard, and he feels like this generation contains those types of people, and that they will be the leaders in the church who can make miracles happen and move mountains for the church and as part of the Lord's work to gather Israel on both sides of the veil. One thing I will say about this generation is that they do go to the temple more, they do work for the dead more, they're more focused on gathering Israel on both sides of the veil, they dedicate their time and their talents more than I've ever seen. Like, I think back to my generation, and I think the opportunities are there for this generation that weren't in previous generations. I mean, temples are everywhere. It's easy to get online and do family history and genealogy. Those things were not so easily accomplished even back in the 90s. I mean, even the early 2000s, it's really been in the last like maybe 15 years that this opportunity has developed for the youth. And I think that this is part of the signs of the times. I do see this as the church making progress and us getting ever closer to the second coming of the Lord. This is that, I think, shift or turning point where the work can be done faster. It can be multiplied. The efforts can be multiplied exponentially with the help of the youth of the church engaged in this work. And it seems like the prophets and the apostles have worked very hard to make this happen for the church and for the youth, to bring these blessings to them and to help them bring those blessings to our kindred dead and to all of those who they will be an example to and a light to. It's like the concept of the salt of the earth or the light of the world, the leaven and the bread, is really becoming widespread and real with this current young generation. And so those are kind of my thoughts and feelings today on that. And then I'll go ahead and put that clip here of Elder Lund, just what he said. It was pretty interesting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if you liked it, and I hope you'll subscribe to the channel.
Executive secretary. I said, wow, that's a great job. I love your boss. And he says, yeah, I love him too. Actually, he wants to talk to you. And I said, well, okay, when? He says, how about tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock? And so, okay. Any hints? And he laughed and he said, no, just come on down. And so we hung up. I looked at my wife and I'm very intuitive about these things. And I thought about that. Well, I've been serving on the Young Men's General Board for 5 years. The old board the presidency is being released. President Nelson is such a remarkable human being. Isn't this great? He's going to tell us thank you for my 5 years of service, and don't call us, we'll call you, and send me down the road. But what a nice thing for him to do. And so I walked in completely clueless. I'd been in his office with my wife for about 15 seconds, and he pulled a chair up and was just sitting knee to knee with me. And he said, well, Steve, we brought you up here actually to call you to be the Young Men's General President. My brain just kind of turned off just then, because I just had to know. That's how spiritually attuned I am. I didn't see that coming at all. I guess I stammered a little bit, and he said, well, will you take the job? And I said, well, of course, President Nelson, but with fear and trembling. And he kind of sat back in his chair a little disgusted. And he said, well, I hope with a little joy too. And I said, well, I'm sure the joy will come when the shock wears off. And he said, well, it's important that you're here. And it's important that you understand this, because this is a very important time for the church. We're in the end of times here. And this is a very important time for the youth of the church. And then he stood up and he walked behind his chair and he says, I've called them, I've invited them to serve in the Lord's battalions. And I said, yes, President Nelson, I know that you have, and I know that they're listening. And he said, well, I hope so. I know that many are, because this is such an important time of gathering. And the opportunity for them to be engaged in that work of gathering has never been like this before. And then he went on for about 10 minutes without taking a breath. 95-year-old President Nelson, and just his whole visage just lighted up with enthusiasm as he talked to me about this final work of the gathering and his deployment of the youth of the church to make that happen. This thing that has been talked about by apostles and prophets for as long as there have been people on this earth, looking forward to the end game when the earth will be rolled up like a scroll, and the Savior will come again. And I walked out of that room just with this intense understanding and knowledge, confirmed to me by the Spirit that I share with you, and that is that He's coming. He really is, and it's imminent. I don't know what that means. All I know is that there's a sense of urgency about the brethren.